To order. Could I have a motion, please, concerning our agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Is there a similar motion with regard to the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Mr. Schwant, do we have any customers to be heard?
I think we might have one.
I see that Mr. Jim Steen is here. Mr. Steen, would you come forward and identify yourself to our friends at home?
Hi, well, thank you. My name is Jim Steen. I chair the Economic Development Authority here in Moorhead, and I wanted to come forward and first thank Bill and the rest of you for inviting our director, Cindy Graffio, along with some of your business visits. I think that's very important for us to, the EDA, I mean, it's basically business retention, expansion, and development. And businesses looking to come to Moorhead are looking at our utility rates is one of the biggest things. And noticing that your rate increases for next year are getting a little stiff, and I know some of the businesses have expressed some great concern over that. I guess I'm here just to ask you to do what you can to keep those rates down. I know there's a lot of expenses. I know you got to purchase a lot of power, and those rates have greatly increased. The transfer is another big issue, and I know people tend to dig their heels in at that, but I think it's going to be important coming in the future to, if we have some kind of, if you want to call it an economic summit or whatever, I mean, we have to get together all the groups, whether the council, the MPS, and even the EDA, if they're asked, to sit down and see what we can do to keep this community more attractive for our businesses coming to town and for staying here. It's so important not to lose any businesses that we have or to restrict any expansions they may have. Besides losing a business, you don't realize the families you could lose. I mean, these businesses employ a lot of people, and it's not just the business that could go away, it's some of our residents, and that's important to our community and our whole economic being. So I just wanted to thank you for your service, and hopefully you can try to keep these rates down and keep us as competitive as possible. I know there's a meet and greet, and Chuck, on Thursday with some of our with our city manager finalists, and I hope whoever that may be, it's a person that can help bring us all together to really work on this issue, because it is getting to be a huge issue, and we need to nip it in the bud while we still can. So I appreciate your time, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for your comments. We're going to be talking about our budget and potentially our rates a little bit later on in this meeting, if you want to stick around and listen to that discussion or even partake in that discussion. And you're welcome to be here for that. Thank you.
Do you want to tell Jim, I don't know if he's aware of the other incentive to the Economic Development Director, which is some continuing education?
Yeah, well, I don't know, Jim, if you've heard this, but we at Public Service have, well, actually, it's not new, but we have offered to send the Director of Economic Development from the City of Moorhead to economic development schools provided by APPA, American Public Power Association, of which we're a member. And we continue that invitation. And so if Cindy would like to go to that course, we highly recommend it, if for no other reason, that she might have a better understanding of what it is a public utility can do to provide those kind of services to our community.
And thank you for that invitation. And John did extend that to us. He's a great member of our EDA team also. And talking to Cindy on this, and she does plan on taking advantage of that. And I think that's going to be a great resource for her, because in her position, it is very important to know the whole aspect of what kind of services we can bring, what kind of benefits we can bring to businesses that are here and are looking to come here.
Well, in reality, we've also thought of Moorhead Public Service as being one of those tools in the economic development toolbox or toolkit. And from that standpoint, we would like somebody to rely on us more, but to also understand what it is that we do and how we can help. And you know that we've had that discussion many times about the various balls that both the City Council and Moorhead Public Service have in the air relative to budgeting processes. And this is not lost on us. As a matter of fact, we do have some letters in tonight's agenda packet from major customers who have told us the same type of thing that you're telling us right now. And so we are very, very much in the middle of discussing what we can do to retain those employers in this community.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Any recognitions, Bill?
No.
Any old business, Bill?
No.
Members of the City Council?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A few things we went over last night.
Saw that.
Yeah, just a couple of things. But regarding MPS, Heidi did share the Pactive and Bush letters with the council, and we haven't really discussed them yet, but those were shared with the 8 members of the council and the mayor. During the report session of the budget meeting last night, we did talk about the transfer and how high it is compared to other municipalities in Minnesota, so we're going to have some discussions about that. And on the lighter side, we passed the water treatment lab remodel. And Heidi says it's a cool idea of making the lab certified as a public testing location, so everybody's pretty happy with that. Other things, we have a meet and greet with potential city managers on Thursday at 5:30 to 7:30, and then we have an all-day meeting Friday with interviews with the city managers. So we have a pretty full week.
Seems to me that you do have a full week this week.
Yeah, it's been great. So,
Are you going to apply for another job somewhere? Thank you, Chuck. Any questions for Chuck? Any comments? Okay. Members of the Public Service Commission, anything to report? Glad that you're back.
Thank you. Past trip was good.
John, anything you want to report from EDA?
I'm looking through my, just bear with me.
Okay.
Nothing at this time.
Okay. Bill, anything you want to report on that's not contained in your written report?
Just a couple things. One is that a week from today, Chris Knutson, our Water Division Manager, will be making a presentation in front of Clay County on our aquifer management plan. So if anyone from the commission is interested in hearing that again or rubbing elbows with the Clay County commissioners, Chris will be there next week. So I don't know if you have any questions on that. You've heard the presentation basically, and he'll be giving that next week. The other one other update is we have had some scams, and it seems like it's Christmas time, so we've had some scams where someone calls our customers and says that if you don't pay your utility bill, and they do it via like gift cards, that type of thing, and they say if you don't pay for it and pay for it over the phone, immediately we'll shut off their power. We don't use threatening tactics like that. But we have had these scams before. If anyone has any questions about something like that, they get a call like that, I would just suggest hanging up the phone, calling Moorhead Public Service directly, and asking us. Our customer service staff will walk you through that process. But and they tend to be commercial customers that they call, and they have called. For instance, one example is a restaurant right at 5 o'clock, so right at a busy time, or right at 4 o'clock, say, and then they say you got to pay immediately, and they're talking to the manager. The manager gets kind of excited because their peak time is coming, and we've actually had someone that called us at the last second saying, "Do I really have to pay this?" And she was ready to pay it, so that would have been unfortunate. So anyway, so there's some scams out there. Last item is just an Oakport dual fuel update. As the commission is aware, we did do a acquisition of the electric service in Oakport, and we have an incentive out there till the end of December for people to convert their dual fuel systems to our requirements. We did up that incentive a couple of months ago, sent out a couple of letters on that, but I know it's getting to be crunch time, and so if there's anyone from Oakport that's listening, that deadline still stands right now. We are expecting a few calls from people that are not quite done, but we talked about it today, and we said, people have to be started with their conversion in order to get an extension. But if they talk to Dennis Eisenbrown, he's working with our service staff, and Dennis will make some exceptions if they're actually, getting things done on that. So just a reminder for Oakport customers, get your dual fuel started before the end of the year, which is the deadline. It's supposed to be done by the end of the year, but at least get the thing going so that we can, you can show some kind of progress toward it. So anyway, that's all of my updates.
Okay, what's our percentage of people who are taking advantage of that?
Right now, we're probably at about 40% of the 150 people that we heard had dual fuel. We knew some of those people would have dropped off because they went to natural gas. But there's probably still another 20 that are in play, so maybe another 10% are in play, and then there's some that we've, just got that are just kind of out there, and we just kind of are wondering right now where they're at. So,
Thank you, Bill.
Question.
Yes.
Bill, regarding the scam issue, do we ever do like statement stuffers in our billing to inform people of something of this? I don't know what the cost would be or how the process would be, but I've seen just a short, quick blurb as far as that's an insert into the billing statements.
yeah, I don't know if we've done inserts per se, but Casey's put it on social media, so it's been out there. And we had a press release, and we were actually on the radio a couple of times on that issue. I know that a couple of weeks ago, XL Energy had the same thing going on, and they were on the radio, and they were talking about it. So I think it's generally out there, so people are aware of it, but we do try and talk about it here, talk about it on social media. I don't know if we've done a bill insert. We may have in the past, but we didn't for this one.
That's probably a good idea, although I don't know how you would keep up with the number of scams that are out there. If you go online and check out the number of scams that are out there, it's incredible. A lot of them are repeats, of course.
Yeah.
And that goes along with the number of solicitations that senior citizens receive from all sorts of sources.
I know in
It's
some-
probably a good idea.
I know in some statements or billing statements, they have a section where you can have so many
Yep. Yeah, we can sure do that.
letters you
That's-
can put on the
Yep.
billing statement, say, be aware of the ongoing scam of such and such. I don't know how
Yep.
many people actually see that or read it as far as exact, but that may have been an option as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea.
Okay, thank you, John. Anybody else? Okay, that brings us down to item 8D, which is to accept report number 5 on the proposed 2017 budget. Bill?
Yeah, I think I'll have Nancy come up here and kind of do the first part of the report, and then I can help answer questions.
Nancy Lund, Admin and Finance Manager. So since our last budget report, we have just refined a few numbers, so there's no big changes in the report at this time. So just a reminder that on the electric side, we're looking at a 3.5% rate increase, of which 2.5% of that goes back to a 2015 purchase power increase. So we do have an additional 1% that we need to add on to that, but just that reminder that we were doing a 3-year phase-in of those rates. So on the electric side, that 3.5% increase to your normal residential customer would be about $3.25 per month. The biggest expenditures that we cover on the electric side, we estimate revenues will be at about $44 million. And of that 44, about $23 million will go towards purchase power. $8.6 million will go towards city transfer. We have over $6 million in capital improvements that will be funded, and then we do have some money budgeted in that 3.5% rate increase to go into reserves to try to build those reserves, which we've drawn down over the last couple of years. so that our reserves, we would hope it by the end of 2017 would be at about 150 days of reserves. Our target for the electric division is to be at 170 days. So we would hope with our forecast that's in place that we would hit that reserve level by 2018 with this budget package on the
Okay, a
electric side.
couple of things I'd like to draw to everybody's attention in your report, Nancy. One of them is that in putting this together, our staff has reviewed the written comments that we received from both private individuals and from our commercial customers. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the 3.5% increase that you're quoting in this report is actually a reduction from what was proposed earlier when we had our rate hearing. Is that correct?
Well, the 2.5 is actually, of the 3.5 is a phase-in from
Yep.
2015, so the third year is of the phase-in. Our original total increase for 2017 was originally projected, I believe, at 4.5%.
So this is a
So
full
we have-
percentage point below what we originally had projected.
Correct, correct.
And if I may add to that, so we had, as part of the budget discussions, we actually talked about the 4.5%. We crunched the numbers again, we moved some projects around, so we came in at 3.5%, and to Mr. Steen's thought, that is basically as low as we can go. I mean, we don't want to go any lower because then we really go into issues operationally and on the reserve. But we did a very tight budget, and we did something very similar on the water side as well. I don't know whether we're going to talk about now or
Well, we should probably,
wait.
yeah, that'll be coming up later in the meeting.
Yeah. So, but we have really sharpened the pencils and pens a number of times to really get as low as possible. But as you guys know, our hands are tied when it comes to outside increases. They have to go somewhere. You know, as Nancy said, 2.5 to 3.5% is actually from 15, and then we need the additional 1% for changes we had in cost on the electric side this year.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything further, Nancy?
Water side, the report still maintains the 6.5% overall water rate increase, and I just wanted to clarify, if you go to the rate page in your budget binder, you'll see that it is an overall 6.5% increase, but it does affect different classes of customers differently. And some of the rate letters that we received, there was definitely responses from our industrial water customers there. And we just wanted to note then that their average rate increase will be in the range of 5% instead of 6.5%. So just wanted to note that. And General Manager Bill Schwant has been in discussions with those large customers.
Well, and something else that we should also keep in the back of our mind is, okay, let's say, for example, I'm going to point to the water customers first. What happens if we lose one and or two of those large industrial customers? What does that do to our rates going forward?
Our rates go up, so those customers
I figured that much, but-
generate, the rates to everyone else goes up. Those customers, those large industrial customers generate, I think it's about 15% of our revenues. So on the water side, a lot of the costs are fixed costs, so then those fixed costs need to be distributed against amongst the rest of the customer base. So a loss of a large commercial water customer would mean rate increases for everyone else to help carry that load.
And the important thing also is those large commercial customers have also, and Chris, maybe you can add to this, but they have also been perhaps some of our most conservative customers in terms of utilizing the resources that they use. I mean, they've essentially gotten themselves down to the point where they're using as little water as possible. Okay.
Correct. So that's probably the comments on the water side. That 6.5% increase to the average residential customer on water will be about $2.06 per month.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Nancy? One question that comes to mind relative to the buildup of the reserves going forward to 2018, would our present projection in terms of getting towards that goal, where do you think that will put us with regard to the bond rating agencies?
It helps us the next time we go to the bond rating agencies. This year, we held on our bond rating. We've got a plan. It's in place. We, have used reserves when needed on the electric side. It's time for us to replace those reserves so that we do have a good standing when we go to the bonding agencies, and it's a couple of years down the road. But we need to be very aware of that need to meet that goal. We've got a policy out there. We need to continue to work towards that policy.
Okay, Ralph?
Do we know when the city has to go back bonding? Because our rating may impact theirs as well.
The city goes to the bond market annually,
Okay.
so, yeah, our bond rating is a piece of their bond rating too, so, but they're on an annual basis.
Are our bond ratings the same?
Surprisingly, yes, they are the same. So normally you would see the city of Moorheads or the city for any public utility, the city being rated probably one step higher than the utility because the city has the backing of the taxing authority behind them, so they normally carry a higher bond rating. In our case, with our financial package, we are able to maintain the same rating that the city has at this time.
Thank
So
you.
that's a real plus for our utility and the city.
Thank you, Nancy. John?
Just looking at some of the letters that we received and some of the proposed rate increases they would feel comfortable with, does our system have a capability of a what-if scenario where we would put in those approximate increases and see how it would impact us or what impact that would have?
I don't know if our system does, but Nancy does through her spreadsheets and that type of thing. So she's done some of that, and the budget committee and staff have gotten together over the past few days and are looking at some options, especially on the water side for the industrial rates. And I believe the budget committee is ready to do something for that class. We also have a rate study that's going to happen. Our water rate studies tend to be between 5 and 7 years apart. I think it's been 5 years since, well, next year it'll be 5 years
yeah.
since we did one. And so in 2017, we're looking at a water rate study, which gives us some, I think, flexibility in what we do for this class. And then next year we can kind of take a look at it and make some adjustments if we need to. So I don't know, Ralph, you want to talk a little bit right now?
Yeah, I mean, so basically what we do know is when we change a class of service and we change a percentage, we know what impact it has financially. And that's how we actually get to the point that we got to on the water side. So maybe we'll just talk about it right now. So on the water side, as Nancy said, the overall increase is 6.5%. The biggest problem we have with that overall increase is our large industrial customers because they get hit hardest. If you take 10% of our water, you're going to get hit with 10% of the cost, obviously. So based on the letters we received, that reflect what Mr. Steen said as well, the large customers have the biggest issue on the water side. So we looked at our rates, we looked at the industrial rates, and we talked to our expert and basically found out, listen, our industrial rates are probably a little bit out of whack, meaning they're probably a little bit too high based on what we are seeing actually being used. Now, we'll get more information on that in 2017 when we actually are going to do a formal rate study, and we'll actually know exactly where we should be. So what we've done in the meantime, we've looked at the numbers, we've looked at the projects that Chris and team have actually put together. A number of them are tied to what the city is doing on the resurfacing of some streets in town. And I think they have pulled back a little bit on the on the length of street that they're actually going to replace, which means we actually will not spend as much money next year as we thought on water main replacement. So we've looked at the numbers and said, listen, can we transfer that spending less into a lower rate, into a more appropriate rate for our industrial customers? And the short answer is yes. And we came to a conclusion that we probably can reduce the industrial user rate to a better rate that is more in line with what they should be paying. I'm sorry, the increase more in line with what they should be paying, instead of going at 5%, maybe at 3.5%. I think that will be well received from the user's perspective, number one, and number two, it will reflect more where we should be on the industrial rate anyway. And to those of you outside, we have two customers, as Nancy said, who consume 15% of our water. Obviously, we want to make sure that they stay in town, but we also make sure that we have a fair rate, and based on the knowledge we have now, a fairer rate would be an increase of only 3.5% for that class of customer. Overall, it would still be 6.5%, but for that class, it would be 3.5%.
Let me pose a question to you, Chuck, in the same regard. We're talking about differentiating rates, if you will, among different classes of customers, which we do on a somewhat regular basis anyway when our cost of service studies come in. Has the city looked at the possibility of doing the same kind of a treatment of the various fees that are collected from those commercial customers? And I'm thinking, for example, the sewer rates that are tied to the water usage and those types of things. I mean, just a question out of curiosity.
No, we haven't talked about it, but I know, if those two major players left the area, I mean, our wastewater would go up dramatically. So I don't know if the whole council's aware of that, but it hasn't been brought up for discussion, no. Not that I'm aware of.
And quite frankly, that's why we asked that those letters from those major customers be sent down to the city council, because we shouldn't be doing this in a vacuum.
No.
And they should be aware of it, because it impacts the employment market, and as Jim pointed out, everything else in this community. And we should be doing something together for all of our customers, because they do own us. And so I'm wondering what we can do going forward to sort of grapple with those fairly weighty questions, because we'll be able to communicate fairly shortly that we're doing some things for these customers. It'd be nice to be in the same position vis-a-vis the city council that, hey, look, we're looking at these same issues with regard to industrial customers as well.
Yeah,
I mean, these letters are very convincing, and they are somewhat frightening when you get right
Yeah.
down to it.
No, I understand that. Yeah, I don't know if maybe like a joint meeting or, Heidi and I could talk to the city council. I'm not sure, but I mean, like I said, I don't know if everybody's aware. I mean, the wastewater is huge if those two left, and I mean, the rates would go up for our citizens if those two did leave, so.
Well, you take the wastewater, add to it the water. I mean, we're talking about a huge shift to residential customers, quite frankly.
Right. So, yeah, and, we could talk to the council and just make sure they're aware of it and get into some discussion or have a joint meeting or, there's all kinds of possibilities. We could just, work on some things, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I can maybe add to that as well. I mean, I've been on the budget committee, I think, 3 or 4 years now. The most uncomfortable part on the budget meetings is when you realize how tight we run the ship. I mean, there is no fat here. And that's really the most uncomfortable piece, because even on the reserve side, we are low, and we have done what we wanted to do on purpose. So we don't have much flexibility when it comes to rates. On the electrical side, we're even more tied, because we're tied to the providers, to the purchase, the amount we have to pay them on the power. And as you guys know, we have had some negative news there. What we expected to be positive news ended up being negative news, but everything is fine on that end. But on the water side too, even though we don't have the cost for the water, we are tight on the rates, and it's part of our cost structure. And we want to make sure that we are competitive and we get new customers in, and more customers like a Pactiv or a Bush Ag in here. But we are tight. I mean, there's not much fat. The only way we can cut is cut services or cut, the replacement side of things. And I don't think anybody up here is willing to do that. I mean, we have pipe in the ground that needs to come out. We have electrical infrastructure that needs to be expanded. We have growth going on in the city, which is fantastic, and that also needs to be supplied with lines and pipe and meters and what have you. So everyone needs to be aware that this is basically a non-for-profit kind of arrangement, which it should be. We are not in the business. We are not like an investor-owned utility here that is paying dividends and what have you. We are owned by the city, and we are non-for-profit, but we need to make sure that with the tight budget we have, we can provide the services, continue to provide the services we provide. And if you look at the way that we provide water in this town, right, hats off to Chris, although who won best water this year? I still think I spiked it with vodka or something. Anyway.
There's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that. Well, anyway.
Yeah.
So we have fantastic water in town. We have electricity in town, which is, I mean, we're the best in the region when it comes to reliability. That comes at a cost, right? You can't just put a pole up and hope it stands for the next 50 years. That pole needs to be maintained, that water main needs to be replaced, and that's what we're doing. So again, the most uncomfortable thing on the budget is always how tight it is. Nobody needs to worry about it. Things are fine, but when it comes to discussions like this, can we reduce by 1%? People go, well, 1% isn't that much. Well, 1% for us is a lot, because that 1%, is whatever, $80,000, $100,000, which doesn't go into replacing water mains, doesn't go into replacing infrastructure. So
Or our reserves. Or our reserves.
Which is, as you guys know, is my biggest concern is the reserves, and we're building them up. So anyway, I get off my pulpit here, but just wanted to make that
You'll
point.
just get right back on.
I get right back on.
I would expect no less. Any other questions for Nancy? John?
Not for Nancy, but for Bill, as far as with correspondence now with these customers, is that something that you are going to do, or you suggest the commission does, or how should we go forward with keeping in touch with these businesses?
Myself and our staff is in quite a bit of conversations with our largest customers, typically anyway. We've been in constant conversation over the past couple of weeks regarding rates. So, I mean, we will follow up with them again to make sure they're aware of what our thinking is and what the action they took. As far as the commission responding, it's probably not necessary, but probably would be warmly received if we wanted to do something to them. So, I mean, it's up to you.
Okay.
Well, my personal belief is that if the policy or decision makers go and see the customers, that's very much appreciated by those customers. So if that's something that the commission sees
That wouldn't be a
fit-
reflection of your banking days with it.
Well, it always had something special about the president or the owner going to see the customer versus anybody else. So I think it would be, in my opinion, it would be appropriate that we outreach, thank these businesses for being a part of the community and for continuing doing business and expanding here in Moorhead, because they are critical to.
Well, and we are, one of those customers at least is looking at expansion, but that's been pushed off now 2 years?
Oh,
3 years?
it's probably, well, they've looked at it like a couple of years ago, and then they probably looked at it 6 years ago.
Right, and the decisions for that customer are not made actually within the continental United States. And so from that standpoint, yeah, continuing that relationship is important to all of us.
And commissioners have gone to both facilities for meetings and for tours, which has been nice over the past 6 years probably.
Okay, anything further? No. Okay, could I have a motion, please, concerning that report?
I'll make a motion to accept the report as proposed.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Thanks, Nancy. That brings us down to item 9, which is to approve professional services for asset management and full-service maintenance program for Oakport Water Tower. Chris?
Chris Knutson, Water Division Manager. So commissioners will likely remember we've been talking about the Oakport Water Tower in respect to the artwork on the Oakport Water Tower for probably the last 6 months to a year. So we've been thinking for a while about, first off, what we want to paint the tower. The second part, how we want to accomplish that painting of the tower. We looked at kind of a unique approach for this project. We're going to use something that's a little different than what we've done in the past. For this project, we're proposing to use something called the design-build approach, which is different in that we won't be doing a traditional bid process for the project. Some of the advantages are, we'll get a 3-year warranty on the project. Basically, we pay a professional services contract to paint the tower, perform structural repairs, and then perform subsequent inspections in the following years. So a little bit different approach. We went out and did an RFP in November, got two fairly comparable price quotes for the repainting of the tower. We're confident in KLM Engineering with a bid of $350,000. We're confident in their ability to complete the project. So a little different, but state statute allows this type of arrangement in terms of not bidding the project. So had legal counsel take a look at it as well. They approved the proposal.
With regard to this concept, you indicated that we won't be going out for bids and that type of a thing. Does it still fall within the confines of the bidding process in the state of Minnesota?
It falls under the confines of Minnesota State Statute for Purchasing. So Minnesota State Statute for Purchasing actually allows for water service maintenance contracts that are extended contracts, i.e. they have to be at least 3 years.
Okay.
It just so happens in that maintenance contract, we'll be performing the painting and structural rehabilitation on the tower. So you can do these provided by the statute. That was the particular question posed to council.
Okay.
Probably 30 or so tanks of this type, and these type of contracts have been completed in Minnesota. One of the most notable ones is KLM has done is actually in Sauk Rapids, Minnesota. It's supposed to look like a hot air balloon. Anyways, it's been practiced and completed throughout the state at least 20, 30 times or so.
Okay. Can I have a motion concerning this matter?
Any other questions?
Or is there any questions? I'm sorry, John.
Still, could you expand your explanation here of the Oakport thought process of having art on the tower? Is that still in process, or
Yeah, we
is it
could-
passed, or is it?
Sure.
Because you don't identify that here.
Yeah, Chris,
Would you
Commissioner.
like Chris to give us Chris to give us a report?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Just push the,
It's, there you go. All right. Well, we've met now twice to deal specifically with that question. And at the beginning of January, we have set aside, I believe it's the 10th, don't quote me, to have some public input on whether or not we like the idea of art on the tower. And that process will sort of give us our marching orders. The Art and Cultural Commission met this morning, and I was there, and they are on board with going forward with our little subcommittee doing the work of creating this venue for public input. So specifically, did I answer your question, or what is your concern?
Look, just as far as, if we're going to have this in April potentially, or August, whichever the dates are, is that going to be sufficient time for your committee to make a decision and then have the work done at the same time that we're painting the tower?
And I was going to appeal to Chris to push for that latter date, and he knows that I was going to do that more or less just because we have grants to apply for. The gathering of artwork, the contest to decide, bringing it to this commission to see if it's acceptable, and then actually working with whoever's going to, with KLM, I guess, in this case, to actually do the process of putting the artwork on the tower. So it's a multi-step process. And I'm sure that we can share that with you if you'd like to see the timeline.
I appreciate this clarification.
Sure.
We could do an update item in regard to that particular timeline.
Yeah.
We've been I've been to a couple of committee meetings as well. We're starting to look at specific pricing and basically kind of getting at the city's or the Arts and Culture Commission's question of how much money do they need to raise and by when. Those are the two main questions we need to address. We're still working through that. That'll probably come down pretty close to the wire, just based on the timeline that we have. One of the fortunate things about using design-build approach, we do have some flexibility in the timeline. We specified 2 timelines, and if we run into some roadblocks, we could certainly move the timeline to the latter of the 2.
I believe Rolf had a question. Are you done with your questions, John? Okay, Rolf?
So the idea still is that the artwork would be cost neutral to us, right?
Correct. So in the RFP, we specified that Moorhead text would be on both sides of the tower and that some logo would be included. And I estimated that cost to be approximately $15,000. So that would be MPS's in-kind contribution to the artwork. The artwork selected could vary between, $15,000 to $50,000. I mean, so they have to basically put, cost has to be part of the process. I mean, because the amount of money they can raise is obviously going to prohibit the design that they can use.
And I'll go back to a question I had the first day we discussed this. Everybody understands that whatever is going to go on there after all this work has been done, all these artists have done renderings, is that this is all subject to the approval of the Moorhead Public Service Commission. And so there may be a decision not to put anything on there depending upon okay.
That was a contingency in the authorization to the Arts and Culture Commission, so that was made very explicit from my perspective.
Yep. I don't want to put any kind of a caveat, but at the same time, we've had this discussion before, and I just want to make sure. Okay? Anything further, any further questions for Chris? Okay? That having been said, could I have a motion, please?
I move to approve item 9.
Is there- Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. Item 10 is to approve professional services for the pilot filter skid unit and joint purchase with the city of Fargo. This looks interesting.
This is an interesting item, so I'll start off kind of with the project need, and then I'll digress into the agreement itself. One of the things that Moorhead and Fargo are actually looking at is the age of our filter media. So both plants were constructed about the same time. Our plant was constructed in 1995. Over the past 20-plus years, we've started to see some degradation in the filter media itself. So we're starting to look at replacement options for that particular media that we have in place. The current media we have in place is called anthracite media. And since the plant was constructed, a lot has changed in the water treatment industry. One of the things that more common filter materials that's being used is something called granular activated carbon. Best analogy I can make is it's a very similar material to what you'd find in a home pure filter. So it's got a little bit more potential for removal of contaminants. One of the things we're worried about, really two things, taste and odor compounds. Ozone is one of the most effective taste and odor removal technologies. We already have that in place. This particular media, GAC, granular activated carbon, would also provide some taste and odor removal. One of the other things that we're curious about and very cognizant of are something called contaminants of emerging concern. And I've had several questions over the past year on something compounds called PFOAs, or basically compounds that are introduced by either like drugs into the environment or other types of compounds that we're now detecting in the environment from all sorts of different discharges. GAC is actually a pretty good technique to remove a lot of those contaminants of emerging concerns and provides another treatment barrier. Where the agreement comes in, because both Fargo and Moorhead were looking at this, and frankly several other utilities, we tried to cooperate on a joint purchase with some other folks. Fargo just happened to be looking at doing the exact same thing. So what we're looking at doing is basically doing a cooperative purchase on a pilot filter unit, which is just a small, think of it like a small filtration system that we can mimic operating conditions on. The thing is, they cost about $160,000, so if we can purchase it jointly, we save pretty substantially. So what we're looking at doing is doing a joint design on the project, joint purchase of the filter media skid, and then MPS would have it for 2 years, Fargo would have it for 2 years, and then we'd either sell it or, somebody would buy it from the other party, something to that effect, in that, there'd be some type of compensation one way or another, back to the original purchasing parties. So there's really two pieces: the purchase of the skid, that's the agreement with Fargo, and then we'll be working with A2S on the actual design and bidding of the skid. We'll have to bid this project publicly. So that's the item in a nutshell.
Okay. Questions? John?
So at this point, in your financial consideration, you have 24.4 for task order. So initially, that's what the approval would be for the 24,400, and then once you get the bid, then you'll come back for an approval of that purchase and then split it with Fargo? Is that correct?
Yep. So the
24.4 for design?
For design. So, and as part of the agreement, we've agreed to split those costs. So as we generate or as E2S invoices us, we'll subsequently invoice Fargo.
So that's
but yeah,
design as well then?
Correct. Design and construction.
I would assume that the agreement with Fargo has been reviewed by council?
It has. Both City of Moorhead, both Moorhead and Fargo Council have reviewed and approved. just got that one today.
Okay. Any other questions? Could I have a motion, please, to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve as proposed for the pilot filter skip unit program.
Okay, is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Next is a task order number 10 with A2S for the water treatment plant SCADA programming. What's happening there?
This is, again, in the lines of aging water treatment plants. So one of the other pieces to the treatment plant is the SCADA system we use to control all sorts of things, control pumps, control our filtration process, et cetera. Our SCADA software is actually, right now, we have an older version and a newer version. We want to basically put a new SCADA system in place that would get rid of both of our existing versions of the software, something that's comparable with newer operating systems. So we have a pretty old operating system running our SCADA currently. Want to bring that basically up to modern times, and then all of the programming associated with that change to the new operating system. So this is actually the client view software that we'll be updating, so what operators use to control everything in our water treatment plant. So a critical piece to our process. Looking for going ahead with that project in 2017.
Okay, any questions? Could I have a motion?
I move to approve item 11.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. I had asked for item 12 to come off the consent agenda when Casey sent things to me. I don't know if it's necessary to do that, but I don't know if it's, I think it's fairly self-explanatory. And unless anybody has any questions, I'd entertain a motion to approve item 12 as well.
I mean, there's no dispute, right? It's just...
Yeah, it's just, we have a policy that the commission will annually approve this list of vendors,
Yeah.
so pretty routine.
We're happy with all the vendors.
Happy with all the vendors. Yep, yep.
I move to approve the list.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. That brings us down to item 16, which is to approve the request for qualifications for human resources legal services. Mr. Schwant and I have previously talked about this issue. I have very definite feelings regarding it. I know that Mr. Anderson has asked for an opportunity to be here for this discussion as well. But that having been said, I'll do whatever the commission would like to do on this matter.
Ken?
Yes.
Since Dave has requested to be involved in discussion, and since he's ill at this point, I would propose just tabling it until he's able to attend
Okay.
for further discussion.
Is there a second to that?
I second that.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Well,
That-
the only thing I was going to maybe mention is that all we're doing in this item is requesting, qualifications from various attorneys. So,
Yep, I understand. Yeah. But
so-
again, that was the...
because we were going to bring it back once we got the qualifications,
Yep.
but we,
I appreciate that, but again, the request was that our other commissioner be here to discuss that.
Okay.
And I think it's appropriate that we...
we'll bring it back first meeting in January.
Do that. Okay. I'm going to go down to item 18, and Ralph, you'll be on the hot seat again. That's to approve the final 2017 strategic plan, budgets, and rates. And I know that you've talked to Dave Anderson. I don't know the content of the conversation, but David asked again that we forestall some of this until he can be here.
Nope, I just talked to him, he says move forward.
Well, that's easy to do without him here.
Yep.
Okay.
No, I talked to him about right before the meeting. I said, do you want to hold? He said, no, move forward. We don't want to delay action, because if we delay action, we have an issue with billing in next year. So,
Okay. Good.
so as I mentioned earlier, I can talk again?
Well, I don't know if there's a way around it.
Okay, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, we have, with the help of the team, and thanks for all your help in that, we've gone through the budget a number of times. We had a couple of meetings. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have sharpened the pencil and pens a number of times, and what we are proposing right now for 2017 is is we had originally proposed a 4.5% increase on the electric rate. We are proposing a 3.5% increase. As I said, we have been able to reduce some costs and sharpen the pencils. So electric rates would be at 3.5%, and on the water side, on average, we are proposing a 6.5%, with one caveat that we are proposing to adjust the industrial rates from an increase of 5% to 3.5%, to be in line with what the rate specialists are telling us, to also address some of the concerns those larger customers have shared with us. And as Bill said, we're going to have a rate study on the water side in 2017, and that will then firm up what kind of rates we would have. Unfortunately, we have to raise rates. As I mentioned earlier, we are running a very tight budget. We got a little bit carryover from past increase, as Nancy mentioned, on the electrical side. Of the 3.5%, 2.5% are from 2 years ago that we have to carry forward. And because of cost increases and the issue we have with the reserves, we do need to increase by that additional 1% to come to 3.5%. On the water side, again, we are at 6.5%. We're in year 3 of a 5-year 6.5% increase overall. The main reason for that increase is water main replacement. As you guys know, we have about 15 to 20 miles of bad stuff left, which we're trying to get out as quickly as possible. We're making good progress on that. Having said that, we are comfortable with that reduction on the industrial increase because we will not be able to do as many projects as we thought we were going to do in 2017 because the city is not going to replace as much on the street side as we thought they were going to. And it's much cheaper for us to actually go hand in hand with the city, and obviously it's much better for the residents as well. So 3.5% on the water side, 6.5% on average on the, 3.5% on the electric side, 6.5% on average on the water side, with the caveat of reducing the increase on the industrial side from 5 to 3.5%. That's the proposal we have. Dave and I are very comfortable with that. We were very happy to hear that City Council yesterday is talking about the transfer. We have a transfer. We have paid it over many years now. But as I mentioned, the budgets are very, very tight, and hopefully we'll have even a better agreement with the city going forward. But right now, we're comfortable with those increases to do what we need to do in 2017, and also address the ongoing issue with the reserves, especially on the electrical side, so we don't, we have the reserve, which we need, and number 2, we don't run into an issue with the bond people at some point in the future.
Okay, questions? Comments? I think to the people at home, and especially to those individuals, both through a residential and commercial, the letters that we received this year were both moving, at least several of the residential ones were, and compelling when you looked at some of the arguments that were being put forth with regard to our commercial rates. And I can tell everybody out there that you may not have appeared in front of the Public Service Commission this year to verbally make an appearance here for purposes of our rate hearing, but the comments that we received were both received and reviewed carefully by each and every one of us up here. And it's important that everybody out there realizes that we are owned by the people in this community, and we will do our best to keep these rates at a minimum. I want to thank Ralph, obviously, and Dave, who's not here tonight, because I can tell you that they worked many, many hours reviewing these budgets, forcing Bill and Nancy to go back with a very sharp pencil and oftentimes with an eraser, and everybody in our staff as well. We take these issues very seriously, and in the past I've indicated that coming from the north side of Moorhead, I represent an awful lot of people who are on a fixed income, and we are answerable to those people who want us. We want to keep their increases to an absolute minimum as well. And I think by doing this, we're coming as close to that as we possibly can while still meeting our budgetary obligations. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? And Chuck, if I may, with regard to the City Council, I've obviously been here for 105 years and had all of these conversations with the council in the past, and I won't be here a lot longer, but I think we are all cognizant of the fact that this discussion is a discussion that now has to take place. One of those commercial customers closed a 100-year-old plant overnight in Wisconsin a few years ago. and that was a very small plant, which is the same size as your organization has here in Moorhead. This is not a Trojan horse. This is true. This could happen. And so from that standpoint, we have to sit down and grapple with these things and do it in an open and honest fashion. And Jim Steen from EDA, your willingness to participate in these discussions from the standpoint of our business community and our EDA is important to us. And I hope that Cindy also was able to take part in these discussions. She belongs at this table with the rest of us in terms of doing this. These rates have an impact on virtually every business in this community and every citizen. And we have to be mindful of that. Well, I will get off my soapbox now. Any further discussion? Could I have a motion, please, concerning item 18?
I'll make a motion that item 18 be approved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. These rates will be going into effect at the beginning of the year. And I agree with John wholeheartedly. We have a need to communicate this result, certainly to the all of the people who have sent us their letters and their comments and who appeared in front of us, and to do so as personally as possible. And quite frankly, we invite Jim and or Cindy to be a part of those discussions, and or anybody else in the city that wants to do that. But we have to engage in conversations. And thank you again for the work on this. We have nothing to go into closed session for. Okay. And the next meeting, if we have one, is going to be on December 28th, which is a Wednesday. I understand that Mr. Rogala will not be with us to engage in that meeting. He'll be on a beach somewhere. Correct. He'll bring us, all of us back some kind of a token of that trip.
You are so needy.
Well, yeah, there's that. Yeah. Other than that, let's adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everybody.